The jet roared like a demon being unleashed. On the deck of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, the noise was so overwhelming that conversation was impossible, even with headsets and hand signals. Every movement was choreographed, every gesture a language of survival. Petty Officer Second Class. Aaron Delaney crouched just beyond the white foul line, helmet tight, goggles down, his gloved hands steady, even as the FA-18 Super Hornet taxied into position. To the untrained eye, he was standing dangerously close, far too close, to the searing tail of a fully armed fighter jet about to launch at full throttle. But to Delaney and his crew, this was routine. It was controlled chaos. Each second on the flight deck counted. The pilot, a young lieutenant named Sierra Voss, ran through her final pre-launch checklist. Her knuckles were white around the control stick, her eyes flicking between instruments and the figure of Delaney, who now signaled with crisp, practiced motions. Sierra had been through hundreds of simulator launches, but each real-world catapult shot was a jolt of nerves and adrenaline. And every time she saw the yellow shirts and green shirts just feet from her fuselage, she wondered how they could work so close, so calmly, in the heart of such violence. From the deck's edge, Chief Warrant Officer Harding watched the sequence unfold. 20 years of deployments had taught him one rule above all: respect the deck. One mistake, a misread hand signal, a gust of wind, a moment's hesitation, could mean catastrophe. Yet the system worked because it had to. There was no backup, no second chances at sea. Harding had trained Delaney himself, and though he never said it, he trusted the younger man with lives, daily. The central conflict wasn't just man versus machine. It was man versus margin. There was barely space for a misstep between safety and fatal error. And despite the Navy's best safety protocols, the deck remained one of the most dangerous workplaces in the world. Why did the crew stay so close? Why put themselves in harm's way every time a bird launched? Delaney knew the answer, because nothing else could replace them. Not drones, not cameras, not remote sensors. The human eye, the human hand, these were still the most precise tools for flight deck operations. When a launch officer gave the thumbs up, when the plane captain flashed final checks, they weren't just following orders, they were protecting the mission, the pilot, and each other. A red shirt sprinted by, holding his ordnance report. The catapult officer, the shooter, dropped to one knee, arm raised, locking eyes with Sierra. Delaney gave the final clear signal and stepped back exactly 3 paces. It wasn't random. He'd practiced that move 100 times, rehearsed it like a dance, because 3 paces kept you alive. Sierra saluted the shooter. In return, the shooter touched the deck, pointed forward, and snapped his hand upward. The Super Hornet exploded down the catapult track in a cloud of steam and raw force, vanishing into the gray-blue sky within seconds. The deck vibrated as Delaney exhaled, barely aware he'd been holding his breath. Another one gone. Another success. But it wasn't relief he felt. It was focus. There were 5 more launches in the next 15 minutes. Harding stepped up beside him. "You good?" he shouted, barely audible over the next jet spooling up. Delaney nodded, wiping a streak of sweat from his face with his sleeve. Always. He was lying, of course. You never felt entirely good on the deck. But you felt ready. You felt needed. And that was enough. Down below, in the ready rooms and the control tower, operations moved like a second heartbeat, unseen but essential. But up top, it was raw, immediate, and personal. No room for error, no buffer between life and death, just steel, steam, and speed. And men like Delaney who stood dangerously close because someone had to. As the next aircraft rolled into place and the shooter gave his signature kneel, Sierra Voss was already circling back in the sky, thinking about the men and women who had just hurled her off the edge of the earth. She trusted them with her life. She always would. The danger wasn't a malfunction or an accident. The danger was complacency. The real battle wasn't with enemy fire or the vastness of the ocean. It was with the margin. And every second, the crew danced on its edge. As night fell over the open ocean, the deck of the USS Theodore Roosevelt became a theater of shadows and blinding lights. Every movement was amplified by contrast, jet-black skies lit by the pulsing flash of landing signals and the roar of returning aircraft. Petty Officer Aaron Delaney stood at his post again, this time guiding planes back to the floating fortress. His yellow shirt, streaked with oil and sweat, stood out even beneath the intense floodlights that lit the angled landing strip. The day's tension hadn't faded. It had merely shifted. Launching jets was dangerous. Recovering them? Even more so. Lieutenant Sierra Voss was inbound, her Super Hornet catching turbulent air as she aligned for her first night trap. The sea below was invisible, and the carrier itself, a blur of lights and motion, seemed to shrink as she descended. Her hands were steady on the controls, but her breathing had quickened. Landing on a moving deck in darkness wasn't flying. It was falling with precision, and there was no room for correction. In the tower, Commander Dana Reeves monitored the approach path. A former aviator with thousands of hours logged, she was responsible now for ensuring every returning pilot made it back in one piece. "Ball call," came Voss's voice over the radio. "Hornet 204, Clara." 3.5 Reeves nodded, listening intently. Voss had the ball. She was lined up properly on the Fresnel lens landing system, but it was razor close. The kind of margin that separated a textbook trap from a bolter or worse. Deck crew moved in practiced formation as the arresting gear was reset. Metal cables lay flush with the deck, ready to catch the jet's tailhook and bring it to a screaming halt in just 2 seconds. But there was always a chance. Too much speed, an off-angle approach, or even a failed cable that a jet would miss the wires entirely and need to shoot back up into the night. Everyone braced. Everyone knew the risks. Delaney glanced toward the approach lights. He couldn't see the aircraft yet, but he could hear it. The low, grumbling growl of twin engines. Then it appeared, just a shape at first, then sharper, lined up like a spear on final descent. The tension across the deck coiled tighter. One mistake from Voss could send a $60 million aircraft skidding into the ocean or crashing across the deck. In the cockpit, Sierra's training took over. She adjusted the throttle with surgical control, keeping her eyes fixed on the meatball, the glowing indicator that showed her alignment with the deck. She knew she was high, a hair too fast. But she also knew she had one shot. "Power," Reeves said calmly into the radio, guiding her like a lighthouse keeper. "Right rudder. Now hold." The jet struck the deck like thunder. Sierra's head jerked forward, the force of sudden deceleration slamming her into her harness, as the arresting wire snagged her tailhook. Just like that, the jet came to a halt in less than 400 feet. Sierra exhaled. Her knuckles were pale, sweat trickling down her spine. But she was down. She was home. On deck, Delaney raised his hand and circled it, signaled to clear the wire. In perfect sync, the recovery crew moved in, resetting the deck for the next aircraft. He stole a glance at the plane's canopy, just in time to see Sierra flash a brief, exhausted smile. That moment, silent acknowledgement between pilot and crew, was why he did this. Inside the control center, Commander Reeves allowed herself a quiet nod. One down. Dozens more to go before sunrise. The danger of proximity had not lessened. If anything, it had intensified. In the dark, senses were sharpened, but depth perception failed. Jet blast could sweep a man into the sea. One misstep could land someone in the path of landing gear or searing exhaust. And yet, no one hesitated. No one flinched. Down in the ready room, Sierra peeled off her helmet and wiped her forehead with the sleeve of her flight suit. She felt the adrenaline ebb slowly, like a tide going out. Around her, other pilots prepared for their turns. No one spoke much. The night air ops were sacred, heavy, demanding. Pilots lived for the rush, but never took it lightly. Delaney climbed down a ladder to the crew quarters during a brief rotation, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the wall. A fellow yellow shirt walked by and gave him a light nudge. "That one was close," he said. "Everyone is," Delaney replied without a hint of drama, just fact. Above, another jet was lining up. The night wouldn't end for hours. And the margin, ever present, ever thin, was waiting. The USS Theodore Roosevelt continued slicing through the waves like a steel leviathan, a floating city locked in perpetual motion. On its deck, dozens of lives intersected with raw machinery, timing, and trust. What kept them so close? Why risk everything within inches of annihilation? Because this was their stage, and every performance was the difference between order and chaos, between coming home or not. The hum of machinery never ceased aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Day and night, its steel corridors vibrated with purpose. In the Combat Information Center, buried deep within the carrier's armored core, a different kind of tension ruled. Here, beneath the flight deck, operations were invisible but vital. It was where real-time data sculpted every launch, every retrieval, and every strategic decision. Lieutenant Commander Ethan Moreau, the ship's air operations officer, paced before a digital wall of radar sweeps and flight paths, eyes darting from blip to blip. He was orchestrating an intricate ballet above, a performance where any misstep could mean disaster. Upstairs, the flight deck was again bracing for launch. The sea was calmer than the previous night, but unpredictability was its nature. Petty Officer Delaney tightened the chin strap of his cranial helmet as he took his position. Around him, jet engines growled to life. Just a few yards ahead, a Super Hornet taxied into position, guided by fluorescent wands and hand signals. It was Lieutenant Sierra Voss again, this time prepping for a catapult launch during simulated combat drills. Her eyes were calm, hands steady, but her focus was unshakable. Every takeoff came with risk, more so when the carrier was angled against the wind, carving through unpredictable waters. The catapult crew finished final checks. A green shirt technician signaled thumbs up. Delaney knelt to signal go. Sierra pushed the throttles forward. Her heart synced with the roar behind her. When the launch officer saluted, the jet shot forward in a blur, steam erupting like a geyser. In less than 2 seconds, she was airborne, flying straight into a blue-gray dawn. The flight deck behind her resumed its countdown. Another jet rolled forward. Another life was seconds from launch. In the CIC, Moreau tracked her climb, coordinating with the air boss on deck and the squadron operations team below. The drill was a mock intercept, testing their response speed, radar acquisition, and communication chains. As the simulated enemy approached the carrier's airspace, Moreau relayed targeting data to Sierra and her wingman. Vector 095, Angels 15, bogey speed Mach 0.8, intercept in 4 minutes. Sierra acknowledged with a curt, "Roger, tally 1." Though it was just an exercise, the adrenaline in the room spiked. Training like this mimicked real-world escalation scenarios. The proximity of jets on deck, in the air, and on radar wasn't coincidence. It was calculated chaos managed by the unrelenting tempo of modern warfare. Delaney took a moment to hydrate near the deck's safety netting. Around him, aircraft handlers moved like clockwork, adrenaline masked by muscle memory. He could still feel the rush of the last launch. His boots vibrated as another Super Hornet thundered down the catapult behind him. He nodded to a crew chief passing by. "How's Voss doing up there?" the chief asked. "She hasn't missed yet," Delaney replied, not with pride but with cautious respect, the kind earned from watching the sky steal good pilots more than once. Back in the cockpit, Sierra locked onto her target. Her radar painted a clean track. The simulated missile cue blinked across her HUD. She squeezed the trigger, then banked left hard, just as she'd been trained. "Fox 3, she called. "Target splashed." Her wingman confirmed. Exercise complete. But it was more than routine. It was the margin of mastery, of knowing exactly how close was too close. As Sierra returned to the ship, lining up for another trap landing, clouds began to form over the horizon. Storms brewed fast in this part of the ocean, and the crew was already adjusting operations to bring jets down quickly. On deck, Delaney's radio crackled with orders. The arresting gear was reset, and the deck cleared for recovery. Sierra's approach vector was rougher this time, crosswinds tugging her alignment. In the tower, Commander Dana Reeves saw the wind shift indicators flickering erratically. She radioed down to the flight deck. "Crosswind increasing, tell her to correct early." A yellow shirt relayed the message instantly. Sierra adjusted, already sensing the gusts. She guided the jet with deliberate corrections, chasing the ideal angle. The Super Hornet hit the deck harder than last time, dragging sparks as it caught the third wire. The shock jolted her spine, but it was within limits. Sierra taxied off and saluted the handlers as they approached. As her canopy opened, she caught Delaney's eyes and gave a tired thumbs up. The storm hadn't caught her this time. Down in the hangar bay, maintenance crews scrambled. A broken nose gear on a separate aircraft delayed the next launch cycle. Tensions ran high, but coordination was surgical. Sailors moved like chess pieces, solving problems under pressure no civilian job could simulate. And in the background, the steady thrum of propulsion echoed. The Roosevelt kept moving forward, always forward. In the wardroom later that evening, Sierra sat across from Moreau and Reeves. The three exchanged a quiet debrief, part technical, part emotional. "It's the proximity," Sierra said finally, her voice even but firm. "We're always inches away, inches from disaster, inches from triumph." Reeves nodded, her gaze distant. "That's the job. We get close because we have to. We stay close because we trust." The ship rocked subtly beneath them, the ocean whispering of dangers yet unseen. But for the crew of the Theodore Roosevelt, there was no mystery in their mission, only precision, proximity, and the endless rhythm of takeoff and return.